to understand. But I suspect also, actually, Jim, that when people are running for a council, say, it's probably not the front of mind, that issue, I suspect. It should be if you're needing childcare, but there are a whole.
If you're a mother of a young child, you think it might be.
You can understand. I mean, I can understand that, but honestly, the council should have been able to tell her that quite easily.
All right.
They will have a policy. I don't know what it is at the top of my head. I'd have to go and look it up. But if it's not there on their website, it probably should be, and they certainly should have been able to explain it to her easily.
Okay. Well, she started an interesting conversation. Fran Wild, thank you for joining us and for clarifying your own position. What else can we talk about at 4 minutes to 5? This is an arresting headline. Twitter tanks. Twitter is struggling to find a buyer. Its shares have gone down 13.5%. User numbers are stagnant. It's interesting to see what works and what doesn't, isn't it, Simon, with social media and how long these companies, which seem to be ensconced for the duration and they'll be here forever, how long they are going to stick around for.
The funny thing with Twitter is not whether it's kind of viable on its size, but that it's not growing. That's the problem. It's stuck in this narrative of always having to have endless growth. But by many measures, a thing that had 300 million users and had a huge number of daily active users and was incredibly relevant for live events such as the presidential elections that they've been live streaming, and they're just signing deals to do more things around television events and sports events that they'll live stream and be able to provide that platform for people to talk about. There's a lot of things right with it, but it's not doing what it needs to do to justify this enormous valuation. So, Twitter itself can still be a great and useful platform full of interesting conversations, but to the market, that's not really doing it.
It's interesting, Duncan, before I ask you what you think, there seems to be an anti-Twitter feeling. I mean, as you say, 300 million is nothing to sneeze at. In the New Yorker, a columnist writes, a little while ago I would have told you that Twitter was a utility, a fundamental service that needed to exist. 140-character tweets were how you found out the most crucial, critical and thought-provoking stories of the moment, live feeds that Simon's talking about and so on. Then he says, I started not to trust that news. Changes to the product made it hard to follow conversations or narratives. There is that anti-Twitter reaction now, which has replaced the wholesale enthusiasm that was there for a while. Duncan, you must think about using social media now as a candidate for a start.
Well, a little bit, but I'm not really an expert at it yet. But the thing about Twitter is that it's very much a broadcast medium, and I'm not sure that that's fashionable anymore. And it turns out that a lot of the Twitterati are broadcasting to each other, and it's kind of this closed loop problem. Whereas if you look at a lot of the other really successful social media, what they're doing is it's much more of a community. You're broadcasting to people who essentially are your friends and can communicate with you. Now, I know that goes on a little bit on Twitter, but ultimately things like Facebook and Instagram and all those kinds of things are friends talking to friends and acquaintances. And I think that's the much more successful medium because it's much more intimate. And I think a lot of what's going on in this kind of social media sphere today is about that narrowing of the group rather than the broadening of it, so you can actually have a sense of participating in a conversation rather than being broadcast to.
Yes,
and also,
or eviscerated.
Also, a lot of the best aspects of Twitter were taken by Facebook. The status update and the way to discover people in what used to be a closed garden. So the spirit of Twitter has been taken by the other big social networks.
Interesting thoughts from both of you on that, and thank you for your further thoughts on the panel today. Simon Pound, Duncan Webb, have a good weekend, gentlemen.
Will do. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everybody. We're back Monday. Checkpoint with John Campbell coming up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight a review has just been released into the use of a seclusion room at Miramar Central School. The Board of Trustees rep will be with us to discuss why autistic children as young as 6 were put in the room. We pay tribute to Helen Kelly with an interview we recorded with her at her home and with words from people who loved her, admired her and knew her as a sister and a mum. The Southern Response customer heading to court as repair costs balloon up to over $1 million. All of that on a busy checkpoint after the news at 6.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. No, my Heidi, my good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. The Ministry of Education has confirmed a school in the Wellington suburb of Miramar did use a small room, lockable from the outside, to confine some children, including autistic ones, for short periods of time. The ministry report says it was being used for time-out for children in response to hitting, disruption, disobedience, as well as biting, kicking, choking and slapping. It does not say how many children were put in the room, and the number of incidents in total is not clear because of poor record keeping by the school. The report says there were at least 46 instances of the timeout room being used, but details remain unclear. It says there was a lack of transparency around the way the school was supposed to be communicating the use of the room with parents. The report was written after a complaint from a parent about her son and his confinement in a small dark room at the school. The school says the seclusion room was last used on September the 20th and has now had the door removed, so it can't be used again. Justice reform advocates believe a child sex offender register is a red herring that creates only an illusion of safety. The first such register was launched today, and the police say it will help them monitor offenders and supervise their rehabilitation. Just Speak's director, Katie Bruce, says the majority of people convicted of child sex offences are never reconvicted for the same offence.
There's little evidence that these registers work because those who commit sexual offences against children, 90% of them are not convicted, and the vast majority are perpetrated by a male family member known to the child. So actually, if we think that this is going to create safety in our communities, then what we really need to look at is prevention.
Katie Bruce says the country needs to use opportunities to stop the harm happening in the first place. The mother of a worker who died in the Pike River mine blast says Helen Kelly was a beacon of hope during tough times and over the years became a close friend. Ms Kelly, who was the president of the Council of Trade Unions for 8 years, has died from lung cancer. She was 52. She was a strong voice in the aftermath of the 2010 mining tragedy as the CTU pushed to have criminal charges laid against the directors of Pike River Coal. Sonia Rockhouse says Ms Kelly had an incredibly empathetic heart and always had room for others.
I mean, Helen gave us hope where nobody else did. So she believed in us, she got us, and she was just such a positive influence and such a calming influence.
Sonia Rockhouse says as her health deteriorated, Ms Kelly fought to get medicinal cannabis legalised, and now others must carry on that campaign in honour of her. Donald Trump has told supporters a wave of allegations that he made unwanted sexual advances towards women are part of a vicious campaign to stop him winning the presidency. Addressing a rally in Florida, he's dismissed the accusations as total fiction. From Washington, here's the BBC's Gary O'Donoghue.
Donald Trump says he has substantial evidence which contradicts the claims by several women that he assaulted them. He's promised to publish this evidence at the appropriate time. Meanwhile, his lawyers have written to the New York Times demanding a retraction and threatening possible proceedings. At a rally in Florida, Mr. Trump called the allegations pure fiction, orchestrated, he said, by the Clinton campaign. At the same time, the First Lady, Michelle Obama, has laid into Mr. Trump, saying his views on women have shaken her to the core.
Gary O'Donoghue reporting there. Thailand's Prime Minister has made a plea to the country to remain calm in the wake of the death of its long-serving king. King Bhumibol, who was 88, was on the throne for 70 years. He was seen as a father figure who guided the nation through decades of change and turmoil, and there are fears his death will create uncertainty. The Prime Minister, Prayut Chan-o-cha, has made an appeal for stability.
For the economy, stock market, trade, investment and business sector, please don't stop. Don't panic to buy or dump stock. I urge everybody to maintain our country's financial security.
The Thai Prime Minister, Prayut Chan-o-cha. The government has declared today a public holiday, though the stock exchange will remain open, and the country is about to begin a year of mourning. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. Sport now. The former All Black Sevens coach Sir Gordon Tietjens is excited by the potential Samoa has to excel on the international sevens stage. The 60-year-old, who stepped down last month after 23 years in charge of the New Zealand men's sevens side, has been appointed Samoa's new coach. Tietjens, who led New Zealand to 2 World Cups, 4 Commonwealth Games gold medals and 12 World Series crowns, will have former Manu Samoa coach Stephen Betham as his assistant.
Samoa has a huge amount of potential to start, I suppose, progressing in the World Series, using the World Series for 2016/17 as to start regrouping, starting to pull together and produce consistent performances.
Sir Gordon Titchens. The New Zealand Breakers basketball coach Paul Henare says his side's not looking for revenge against last season's champions Wildcats tonight in Perth. The two sides will play each other for the first time this season since the Wildcats beat the Breakers in last season's final.
They're great no matter what's happened the year before, and this is a new group. Yes, there are some bodies that are here from last year, but this is a totally new group, and we'll approach the game that way as well.
Breakers coach Paul Henare. The Australian coach Mal Meninga has named 3 debutants for tomorrow's rugby league test against New Zealand in Perth. Shannon Boyd, Valentine Holmes and Tyson Frizzell will play their first matches for the Kangaroos. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life goes worm farming in central Otago. You'd be surprised. We have a mixtape from the multi-talented composer and arranger Mahuia Bridgman Cooper. I chat with Stacey Stewart, also known as Just Plain Evil. She's hitting the mat in Auckland this weekend as part of the pro wrestling show Maniacs United. And we have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to waiting, because all good things come to those who do, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Weather now, the short forecast taking us through to midnight tomorrow Saturday into our weekend. For all of the North Island, periods of rain or showers, isolated thunderstorms and hail possible. However, long fine spells for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay for the rest of today. Nelson and Buller, showers today, thunderstorms and hail, especially around Nelson, should be mainly fine tomorrow, but isolated afternoon showers about Nelson. For Westland, the showers gradually clearing today, a fine day for Westland tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, occasional rain, thunderstorms and hail north of Christchurch for the rest of today. Snow lowering to between 400 and 500 metres this evening, and showers should clear up tomorrow. Otago and Southland, a few showers spreading from the south today, mainly fine tomorrow. Showers about the south coast and Stewart Island. Fiordland, a mainly fine day today. Showers develop tomorrow though. And out of the Chathams, rain develops overnight, some heavy falls tomorrow. It is coming up to 8 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Paul. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for being with us. Coming up tonight, Helen Kelly in her own words and in the words of people who loved and admired her. But we begin at Miramar Central School in Wellington, where a report has just been released into the use of that seclusion room. It was conducted by psychologist Terry Johnston after a complaint by a parent in July who discovered her 11-year-old autistic son had been put in the seclusion room on 13 occasions over 9 days. She interviewed 19 staff and found there were 67 dates in 2015 and 16 where children were placed in the room for behaviour such as biting, hitting, kicking and being generally disruptive. The report found some occasions where children had been put in the room had not been logged, and there was miscommunication between some parents and teachers over its use. It concluded the room should only have been used as a last resort. We asked to speak to the school's principal, John Taylor Smith, or the chair of the Board of Trustees. Both declined and referred us instead to board member Pete McFarlane. I asked him how many children had been put in the seclusion room.
8, I think it is.
8 children, and on a total of how many occasions?
I'm not sure of exactly how many occasions, but we're talking like once a week kind of frequency or overall.
So in 2015, there are 31 dates recorded. In 2016, so far this year, there are 36 dates recorded. Yep. But on some of those dates, a child may have been in the room more than once.
Yeah, that's true. We need to remember that this room is used for the most serious extreme behaviour, and so it's for kids that are in a state where they're physically assaulting other children or staff, or they're a danger to themselves. So we're removing them to let them de-escalate and calm down. It's only for a short period of time. And we also should look at where this has come from. It's been in place. It was designed by specialists in 2002. And it's been used since then in consultation with educational specialists.
There's no reference to it in the 2014 ERO report. I'm surprised about that. Why not?
I don't think there was any reason to put it in there. I'm struggling to think of any other schools that would have a reference in their ERO report either. I don't think it's something that they look at.
Okay, if you have a special education centre and it deals with children with autism, some of them quite severe autism, and you routinely on 36 separate dates and on more occasions so far this year put autistic children in a seclusion room, wouldn't you think that would be something that the ministry would refer to?
I don't know, actually. I'm not sure what they actually are looking for when they come in and do those things.
And when this inquiry began, when did the ministry and the school start working on an inquiry into the seclusion room, the use of it?
That started, I'm not sure the exact date, but we received a complaint, and I think it was copied to the ministry, and then we made the move to get the investigation started, an independent investigation.
Was that July 22nd you received that complaint?
That sounds about right,
Okay,
yes.
and the inquiry, the ministry's investigation started in the next week or two?
That's right,
So late July, early August?
That's right, yeah.
When did you formally notify parents at the school that the Ministry of Education was conducting an inquiry into the use of a seclusion room at Miramar Central?
We didn't. That came out with our communications last week.
When you say last week, you mean this week, don't you?
We advised parents that there will be something coming out about the use of a timeout room on Friday afternoon last week.
Is that because you knew the New Zealand Herald were working on a story?
Well, yeah, because we were telling them about the story that's coming up.
Right, and the formal notification on your website was on October 10th?
Yeah, that's right, that's Monday, yeah.
So otherwise, the parents wouldn't have known, would they, that the Ministry of Education was conducting an inquiry into the use of the seclusion room at the school their children were at?
Could I just say it's an independent specialist that was conducting the inquiry rather than the Ministry of Education?
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But were it not for this report, the parents would still not know that that inquiry was being conducted.
That's right. We also need to consider here too that there's matters of privacy around this too, because there's a child and a family named in this. So we wouldn't normally go around talking about this kind of stuff.
Absolutely not. But you and I are managing to have this conversation without identifying the child. Surely, you know, Pete, I appreciate you fronting, but there is an inquiry taking place into the use of a seclusion room at your school that has been taking place for roughly 2 months and no parents have been told.
Yeah, so the inquiry has actually finished. We've got the report. There's various actions in there that we are taking to rectify the situation.
What are the actions? What are the actions you're taking to rectify the situation?
So we've closed the timeout room. It is no longer in use. That came from the board immediately we received the report. That was to cease being used immediately. We have got some extra resource in to help the education specialists in the COFI unit to be able to find new ways to manage the behaviour, the extreme behaviour that would lead to somebody being in the timeout room.
When did you close when was the timeout room closed exactly?
Monday. Well, effectively Monday, because that was the first day of school after we received the report.
After the New Zealand Herald ran the story?
No, after we received the report on Friday.
Right. And so you didn't tell the parents that the inquiry was taking place, it all became public and you closed the room?
Yes, well, we closed the room as a result of the report, not the media.
Was it wrong to have the room? Was it wrong to use the room in the way you were using it? Now, I know what some of these children have been doing, and they have been, hitting and biting, and they've been expressing themselves in physical ways. There's all sorts of ways to react to that. One is that if you lock autistic children in a small room, their anxiety and stress is going to manifest itself in physical outbursts because a lot of these children don't speak.
Yes, that's true. But what we also need to remember is this is not done in isolation by particular teachers. What this has done, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. These part of a behavioural management plan that's developed with education specialists, our teachers, of course, and the parents. And the children go in there, and it's a well-known thing. So it's not like we pick people up and chuck them in. It's much more planned.
So Baxter's parents, Nairi and Jeremy, who I spoke to yesterday, whose child is non-verbal, has a mental age of about 2 or 3, although he's 6. Did they know he was going into an isolation room?
No, and I know a bit about this because I was in the room both times when Jeremy came and saw us. He was very angry, and understandably so. So at that particular meeting, I committed that we would go over and find out what was going on. What I think we have to say too is one of the things we've been pointed out in this report was some of the documentation wasn't up to par. This is one of those occasions. We told him at the time that we didn't believe Baxter had been in timeout, and that's, to the best of our knowledge, that was the case.
Because it hadn't been logged. Baxter, a
right.
non-verbal small boy with the mental age of a 2 or 3-year-old, had been put in timeout and it hadn't been logged.
Yeah, so I'll just explain a bit further than what happened there, because I'm not contesting any of the facts that Jeremy and Ngari have put, because that tallies with what I found out also. And so what happened was on the particular day, there was a different teacher looking after Baxter. They touched his cheek. He had a sore tooth and he bit the teacher. The teacher put him into timeout. The TAs, or the teacher aides, that knew Baxter and knew about his behaviour plan realised this wasn't right. And so they got him out of there pretty quickly. We think he was in there for between a minute and 2 minutes.
Right, but he was put in there, wasn't he? I mean,
that's right.
I don't want to repeat the details of Baxter because it seems gratuitous. Non-verbal, low, mental age of 2 to 3.
Yeah, it's
and is that why you've closed the room? Because basically this is not an appropriate response to children like Baxter.
Yeah, I think that over the last 15 years or so since this unit was built and the timeout room was put in it, thinking has changed about how we manage this kind of extreme behaviour.
When you say extreme, Pete, extreme. This Baxter's 6. He's not a member of the headhunters.
Yeah, appreciate what you're saying there. That's true, but I mean, we also have a duty of care to our other students and to our staff.
Pete, sorry, it's a special education centre, right?
Yes, that's right.
Do you think you shouldn't be in the special education centre business at Miramar Central School? Are you just out of your depth with this stuff? I mean, these children are difficult, and obviously they require special and particular care. Should Miramar Central not be doing it?
No, I don't believe that's the case. We're actually we had quite a good reputation for managing special ed, and I think we do. You can see the professionalism of our staff is second to none. I've got to go on and explain a bit more about the Baxter thing, and with that, I was in the room when Jeremy came back later in the day, and we have the TA that have been dealing with this child. And you can see the emotion coming from this because they love these children, the people that deal with them. And they're totally professional, and they do such a fantastic job that I couldn't even begin to think about how I would do it. And you can see it was a really emotional meeting. I've been quite moved by it, to be honest, and I'm struggling to come to terms with what's happened, and I'm really it's upset me quite a bit, especially about Baxter. And I just want to put my apologies through to Baxter's parents because. This shouldn't have happened. We mucked up, and I think we'd like to put things right and do well from here.
And so, in terms of doing well from here, what is the most important thing, do you think, in terms of, because I guess because people didn't know about this, I guess because a lot of the stuff's being learnt through the media, I guess because in a way you're playing catch up. So what's the most important piece of reassurance you can give now to the parents of these children who might now be contemplating, as Baxter's parents are, their future with the school? What would you like to say to them?
I said on the day, and I'll repeat it, and I think it's too late, but we'd love Baxter to stay. The teachers love Baxter, and it's really obvious when you see them. There was a lot of emotion in the room that day. We'd love them to stay. And for other parents, their children are safe. We do not use that room anymore. What we are doing is the bits where we have mucked up. Our record keeping wasn't up to scratch, and our communication with parents wasn't up to scratch. We've got people from the ministry. They've resourced us up so that we can address some of those issues, improve the management plans for the kids involved, and also help us transition to other ways of dealing with that kind of behaviour. And that's what we're doing. We're not shying away from this. We are making sure that this happens. I'll give you my personal reassurance that this will happen, it will be improved, and we will get things right.
It's Pete McFarlane, who was the Miramar Central School Board spokesperson after the chair and the principal both declined to be interviewed. It's 5:20. Coming up next, tributes to Helen Kelly from some of the people who knew her best. And after the 5:30 headlines, a very special interview with Helen herself that we conducted in her home in August. Also coming up, why the Crown says Gable Tosy effectively pushed a New Zealand woman from his balcony. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Tributes to Helen Kelly, former CTU head and one of New Zealand's most prominent ever trade unionists, have flowed from all corners of the country today. Politicians, unionists, business leaders, the families of forestry workers killed on the job, the families of Pike River mine victims, united, whatever their political persuasion, by admiration for a woman who gave much of her adult life to an unwavering commitment to workers' rights. Our political reporter May Heron on Helen Kelly's life and legacy.
Born September 1964 in Wellington to Pat and Catherine, Helen Kelly started her working life as a teacher, but she quickly became immersed in union affairs. Not surprising, considering her father, a truck driver, was a well-known, hard-hitting unionist, and her mother was passionate about the anti-Vietnam War movement. It's fair to say protests were a part of life in the Kelly household. Helen Kelly's first union official job was in 1990, and she continued to fight for workers until the end. Pike River was close to her heart. She was a strong voice in the aftermath of the 2010 mining tragedy as her union pushed to have criminal charges laid against the directors of Pike River Coal. Sonia Rockhouse, whose son died in the blast, says Miss Kelly became a close friend.
I mean, Helen gave us hope where nobody else did. So she believed in us, she got us, and she was just such a positive influence and such a calming influence. And, you know, the one thing that Helen wants from everybody is to never give up the fight. So fight for what you believe in, and that's one of the last things that she said to us. And that was something that she was sad that she wasn't going to be there to see us through to getting some justice and accountability.
Workplace health and safety was an issue Helen Kelly fought tirelessly for. She pushed hard to regulate, unionise and improve safety, particularly in the forestry industry, while meeting and supporting the families of those injured and killed. Mary Ann Butler Finlay's husband, Charles, died after being hit by a log in 2013. Miss Kelly and her union successfully prosecuted the forestry company he was working for after WorkSafe declined to, and won over $100,000 in compensation for Charles Finlay's family. Miss Butler Finlay says Helen Kelly never gave up fighting for her.
You know, who would do that really? I mean, like, who would take the time? They don't know us from a bar of soap, but at the end of the day, it just come down to, you know, she was always about the people, always about people's work and conditions, and to my family and I, she became a very, very important person. She was our lifeline back to Charles. I mean, she became more than just the union lady and Helen Kelly there. She's like my sister. She's part of us.
Helen Kelly became the first female president of the Council of Trade Unions in 2007. She stayed in the job for 8 years until her lung cancer diagnosis saw her step down a year ago. Her attempts to manage the pain, which included a broken back caused by tumours, led to her next campaign as she battled to get medicinal cannabis legalised. Pike River widow Anna Osborne, who is battling Hodgkin's lymphoma, turned to medicinal cannabis for pain relief on the advice of her friend. She's just found out chemotherapy hasn't worked and she still has tumours.
I'm going to be strong and I'll beat this cancer. So if I can, and I will, I'm going to do that for Helen. You know, I'm going to keep fighting like she has. She's my inspiration.
Sonia Rockhouse, who visited Helen Kelly in hospice 2 weeks ago with Anna Osborne, says others must now carry on that fight for legalising medicinal cannabis in honour of her. She says even in her final days, Helen Kelly never lost her empathy for others.
We would go to the hospice and we'd spend time with her, and then we would go and sit outside, and the constant stream of people that were coming to visit her, and phone calls and emails, and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. She was exhausted, absolutely exhausted, but she would not turn anyone away.
Labour leader Andrew Little has worked closely with Helen Kelly since the 1990s, when he too was a union official. He says Miss Kelly has helped change the face of unions in New Zealand.
She's established an inspirational style of union leadership, which is about picking on issues that are emblematic, that are symptomatic of problems that are wrong, and just fiercely and fearlessly going after them. And I think her legacy will be an emerging generation of young new union leaders, because the reality is that fight isn't over.
Helen Kelly has had a fraught relationship with the present government. She says Prime Minister John Key made commitments to her union that were not followed through, and she never forgot how during the employment law dispute over the Hobbit films, Senior Minister Jerry Brownlee called her a liar on television. But today that fractious past was put to one side. The Workplace Relations and Safety Minister, Michael Woodhouse, paid tribute, describing Helen Kelly as a passionate advocate for workers' rights. And Marianne Butler-Finlay says Helen Kelly's work will live on.
Forestry and that has certainly gotten a lot better than what it was way back then. There are still changes and stuff in that, and she has left us a list of jobs and things to do with regard to that, so it's not as if we're going to be taking our eye off the ball, so to speak.
Helen Kelly is survived by her husband Steve Hurring, her son Dylan, brother Max and mother Kath. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
And Dylan and Max will be joining us. Please stay with us. 5:35, we have an interview that we recorded with Helen in her home in Wellington in August, and it is a lovely insight into her and what she stood for and how she viewed the world. That's it. In about 10 minutes from now. Let's go to Brisbane. The Crown says Gable Tosty, who's accused of murdering New Zealand woman Warina Wright, effectively pushed her off his 14th floor balcony by making her so scared she had to flee. Gable Tosty has pleaded not guilty to the murder of the 26-year-old who he met on the Tinder dating app while she was holidaying in Queensland. Tosty himself chose not to give evidence today, leaving the prosecution to close its case in the Supreme Court in Brisbane. ABC's Alyssa Betts was there.
The Crown went first, and I guess their main point was that the events leading up to Warina's death, the intimidation and the violence, they say, that happened just before Tosty locked her on the balcony meant that he as good as pushed her. And that the prosecutor said the only abject terror would have pushed Warina to attempt such a risky manoeuvre as trying to climb down from the 14th floor. So he went on to say that Warina probably had unlawfully assaulted Tosty earlier in the evening, and that's where he started replaying sections of that audio recording that has dominated this court case, really. He played a part where she was allegedly throwing things at Tosty, but pointed out that the recording seemed to suggest that Tosty really reasserted control very quickly and quite easily. He then went on to play a later part of the audio recording just towards the end before he puts her out on the balcony or forces her out on the balcony and locks her there. And he says that the tables had turned by that point. The prosecutor replayed that last section where she's screaming repeatedly, no, no, and there's sounds of struggle. He said that at that point she had become the victim, that Tosty's actions were unreasonable and excessive and had resulted in an act that had caused death that would have been foreseeable by an ordinary person. So he wrapped up to the jury saying that they had to decide whether there was an intent on Tosty's part and whether that was in fact murder or whether there was no intent and it was in fact manslaughter instead.
And what has the defence said in response to this? They're still going, the defence, aren't they? What are they saying in closing?
Well, look, they've started off, and there'll be some time yet to come before I think they wind up. But they began by addressing the jury and saying that they cautioned the jury members against seeing the world as one of just simply goodies and baddies. So they said that it was unfair to minutely analyse that 6-minute audio recording section that the Crown has focused so much on, and that 6 minutes, of course, is that no, and the struggles, but just before the being forced out onto the balcony. The defence lawyer Saul Holt said such analysis where you stop the tape and you analyse a word and you analyse the sound of someone's voice is not reflective of how real life runs or how reality is or the context of that whole night. And he urged jury members and people in the courtroom to reflect on what they might sound like if someone recorded just a section of their angry voice when they're yelling at a child and having that heard played over and over and over in the courtroom. And he told the jury that both Tosy and Ms. Wright were real people and not how they were portrayed in the media as, quote unquote, a Tinder killer versus an innocent victim. So there's been a lot of that kind of emphasis by defence, but they'll continue on later this afternoon.
It's Alyssa Betts from the ABC. Coming up, Nona wraps the Business Week. Helen Kelly, in her own words, filmed and recorded in her home with her son and her brother just 2 months ago in August. But first, here's Paul Brennan with RNZ's headlines.
Thank you, John. In our headlines this afternoon, a special Ministry of Education investigation has confirmed a school in the Wellington suburb of Miramar did use a small room, lockable from the outside, to confine some children for short periods. The ministry says it was used for time out for students, including autistic ones, in response to hitting, disruption and disobedience, as well as biting, kicking, choking and slapping. Its report says the room was used at least 46 times. A member of Miramar Central Schools Board, Peter McFarlane, told Checkpoint 8 children had been put in the seclusion room. He says from the start of term this week, it was not being used. Justice reform advocates believe a child sex offender register is a red herring that creates only an illusion of safety. The first such register was launched today, and the police say it will help them monitor offenders and supervise their rehabilitation. Just Speak says to create safer communities, the focus needs to be on prevention. The Crown says Gable Tosy, who is accused of murdering New Zealand woman Warina Wright on the Gold Coast, effectively pushed her off his 14th floor balcony by making her so scared she tried to flee. Mr Tosy, who has pleaded not guilty, chose not to give evidence today in the Supreme Court in Brisbane, and his defence called no witnesses. The mother of a worker who died in the Pike River mine blast says the late Helen Kelly was a beacon of hope during tough times and over the years became a close friend. Sonia Rockhouse says as her health deteriorated, Ms Kelly also fought to get medicinal cannabis legalised, and now others must carry on that campaign in her honour. And Donald Trump has told supporters a wave of allegations that he made unwanted sexual advances towards women are part of a vicious campaign to stop him winning the presidency. Addressing a Republican rally in Florida, he dismissed the accusations as total fiction. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update will be at 6.
Thank you so much, Paul. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. And Nona, what happened on the markets to end the week?
Well, let's see. The New Zealand dollar is holding steady amid some turmoil in global markets, mostly because they're concerned about Chinese trade data, which has put some question marks over the health of that economy. Looking ahead, we've got Janet Yellen's speech later in Friday, so in New York, that will cement whether or not we're going to have an interest rate hike in the United States. So our dollar is trading at US dollar 71 cents. 93.6 Australian and 58.1 British pence. And our top 50 index is also holding steady, up another 13 points today to 7,133.
Thank you so much, Nona. Have a wonderful weekend. Nona Peltier, ending the week of business. Well, we return now to Helen Kelly. So much has been said about her today. Tributes from people who loved her, tributes from people who may have been ideological and political adversaries, but who admired her greatly and said so today. 2 months ago, we flew down to Wellington to spend a morning in her company. Her son Dylan was there, her brother Max was there, proud, sad, proud. Sian Riggs was there, gently playing attendant. You can watch this interview right now, by the way, on YouTube, on the RNZ website, or on Freeview Channel 50, and it will be up on our website soon too. As Helen Kelly sat in the corner of her Mount Vic living room, the city she loves so much spread out beneath her, and we talked. Nice to see you, Helen.
Nice to be here. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Who else is here? Who's Sian? What's Sian doing?
Sian is the head of the Tertiary Education Union, actually, and she's here helping me. And the lovely Council of Trade Unions have got a roster. So in the mornings and the afternoons, people come round and make me tea and look after people like you and allow me to keep working. It's really lovely.
So every morning and every afternoon, someone else turns up?
Yeah. Ross Wilson's coming this afternoon. You know, there's nobody spared. It's just beautiful, actually. And that is the one thing about being sick. The generosity has been sensational. It's just one example. It's hundreds.
This is your family home? Is this where you grew up, in this house?
Yeah, this is where I grew up and now live here, yeah. So I haven't strayed far from the...
No, from,
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful place. And
it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
So this was your mum and dad's home?
Yeah, and this suburb was a very working class suburb when we were kids. You know, the local school would have been a very low decile school.
What was it? Did you go to Clyde Key?
Yeah. So we had, rubbish collectors next door and wharfies up the road, and Dad was a truck driver, and the houses were cheap, yeah.
Were you always going to become the person you became, do you think? Were you always going to be...
Well, I was always going to be political and always be active in some way like that, because the whole family was political, active, and still is.
And brave too, right? I mean, there's all sorts of ways of being political, isn't there? I mean, sometimes you can be described as a political person because you can hunt with the hounds and run with the hares.
Yeah.
Your dad never did that, did he?
No. And so, he was a very, very hard-working trade unionist for the lowest paid cleaners and caretakers in New Zealand. And, it had incredible conditions because we had a proper, decent industrial relations system. So, cleaners and caretakers had a decent wage, permanent work, centrally funded from the government and schools and things. When you look at how all of that work has deteriorated, he would be heartbroken, to see what's now happening with caretakers and cleaners. 16 different employers each year contracting out to lower and lower prices. No permanent sort of caretakery type jobs anymore. When you think of the atmosphere that we organised in with him now, how workers are, it's quite distressing, really.
The casualisation of jobs and the farming out of contracts.
Yeah, and when someone gets a decent job now with a contract, everyone's amazed and celebrates. Oh my God, my kid's got a good job. They've got a proper contract. The employer seems to want to train them. It's like a miracle. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I think you're right, yeah.
They've got an apprenticeship. How did that happen, So things have really dramatically deteriorated, I think, for young workers.
Did your dad ever, because people said horrible things about your dad, did he ever sort of sit in the corner and feel sorry for himself and think, I can't go and do it again tomorrow?
They said wonderful things about him as well.
Yeah,
That's the contrast.
I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah, so he believed in what he was doing and knew that unions are essential public institutions, and without them, life is miserable. He was just, determined about that, and he was right, and he was never ashamed of the work he was doing. Yeah, so... And all learned on the job. He was a working class boy who didn't finish school and, could write a sentence which was about 5 paragraphs long without a full stop. Yeah, things like that.
Your eyes are sparkling. You're proud of him, eh?
I am proud of him. We had a very good father and mother, and my mum's still alive. She's 90, yeah. But they loved us and they included us.
And what did they make you believe in?
In equality and humanity, really. I think that everybody is of the same value. I think it was the primary thing, that when you saw somebody being treated in a way that you felt was unfair, it was because they were not being treated as a human being or as a citizen or, as an equal. And that was the analysis that we were always taught.
So that you were taught that as a child, right?
Yeah, and we were taught about South Africa, we taught about Vietnam. Our parents were very active in Vietnam. So we learned it internationally as well as locally.
You became a teacher? Briefly?
I did.
You studied law?
Yeah, I studied teaching first.
Yeah.
And because that's what people did, right? And
is that what people did, or is that what, forgive me, girls or females or young women
girls,
did?
Yeah. And I wanted to be a teacher, and I loved teaching, although I only taught for a couple of years. But it's a fabulous job. I mean, it's the hardest job I'll ever do. It was harder than the CG president's job. It was absolutely non-stop, unfinished, constant pressure to teach in a class of 7-year-olds, 37-year-olds, and keep them all busy. And you go home and you think, oh my God, if I don't teach them, they won't learn. They're only 7. What's going to happen to them? I mean, you go home and you think, I didn't even talk to that kid today. You always have this guilt and be working away and working in the weekends.
Was that about fairness?
I think it was. I thought, well, if they're going to spend half their life in your class for a whole year, you probably had an obligation to them to sort of move them forward and teach them. And that was a skill which you didn't really understand yourself when you were first year teaching. Yeah.
And when you became a union delegate, did that feel just right? Did that just fit?
No, it felt like typical. I'm a first year teacher and the school's going to lump me with this delegate's job. That was my first delegate's job. But I was pleased to do it because it was right in the middle of tomorrow's schools. It was right in that transition and there was a lot of issues and I was very interested in them. you know, in those days everything was structured and everyone was in the union. You had these branch meetings and that's what you did. I mean, those meetings are much more few and far between now, and they're about issues. So I think they're much more interesting. We've learned a lot about, you know, having a topic that people, like teachers care about education, right?
Yeah.
Have an education union meeting about national standards or something. No, they absolutely can take it over and contribute, yeah. And so unions need to learn about how they engage workers and what the issues are that they're interested in. Yeah.
How do unions even get to workers now? I mean, how do, for example, if you're a cleaner with Spotless, and I'm not picking on Spotless for any reason, it's just the first name that came to mind, how the hell does the union get to them?
Well, this is part of the problem. We've got an industrial relations system that doesn't cover everybody, doesn't extend those international rights to all of those workers. So the forestry workers haven't got a shit show in hell. And farm workers of having collective agreements, even though they've got the same international rights as you and me, of having access to the union, of being able to join a union easily without threat. And that is a problem with the law. And the government has deliberately just cut it down and down and down and made it harder and harder and harder. But also when the law changed in the 90s, it excluded the most vulnerable workers from coverage, and they've paid the price for it.
When you say the most vulnerable, who are you talking about explicitly?
Well, let's say, for example, forestry workers used to get 70% of the profit share, and they're now down to 30% over this period of the last 20 years. You know, we tell the story of Charles Finlay, killed in the middle of the night, $16 an hour after 27 years in the bush. Well, what was he meant to do to change that? There's no union, there was no collective, there was no opportunity for him to collectively bargain, and his wages just went like this, and that forced him to work longer and longer and longer, and in the dark, and the forestry contract was screwed down. It's a legacy story of lack of recognition of equality and the need for people to earn a living when they're working. I mean, the deal is you go to work, you earn a living, you have a decent life, isn't it? That's not the deal. We need to talk about it. You know, if the deal is that you get up at 4 a.m, drive into the woods in the middle of winter, and then work in the dark until someone drops a log on you, then that's not a great deal, really.
You managed to achieve something remarkable in forestry because it was a terribly unsafe business, and that's not a crass shorthand, that's a statement of fact. People were dying at an alarming rate.
It was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And no one had even noticed, and it was, you know, it was quite a weird way that I got into it, because we hadn't noticed. And after Pipe, we started to say, well, what else is going on? You know, and it became transparent that this was a really big problem area, and that you know, to give credit to the forest owners, they obviously knew they were getting close to the edge of what was acceptable anyway, but they have changed.
So what was the worst year?
2012.
How many people died in forestry?
10. And there's only 6,500 people on the payroll. So of the 6,500 on the payroll in 2012, over 1,000 of them were on ACC and had been on ACC for more than a year. So, and only 12 prosecutions of 900 serious harm accidents. So we just got in there, took these private prosecutions, publicised the cases, gave a voice to the widows and the mothers and the people who had lost loved ones in the forest, and then we set up this inquiry. We won the inquiry.
So someone was dying every 5 weeks.
Yeah. And in terrible circumstances, not dying in normal, well, nothing's normal, but, you know, just in absolutely overworked, exhausted, bad wet weather gear, wind blowing over a tree on top of them. It's endless.
And what's it fallen down to? What's the most recent year, do you know?
Well, we understand that the accident rate, we've had about two or three deaths this year, which we were disappointed in because we had this whole period, like 15 months really, with
no
nobody.
deaths. Yeah.
But it's about 70% reduced in serious harm accidents, which is sensational, right? Yeah, sensational. And I mean, but it's actually made those families angry because they now know that, you know, their people didn't have to get hurt either. There'd been this initiative. One of the families that we worked with, their dad was killed, and the 2 boys are working in the forest. 40 minutes to call in his death, even though he was still alive. Didn't ring in the inspector, didn't ring in the ambulance or the helicopter. You know, this all came out in the coroner's hearing. I mean,
40 minutes.
40 minutes, which was what they did in Pike, right? They left 40 minutes before they rang in the explosion. With this man when he was killed, Dave McMurtry, when he was killed, the employer didn't ring it in for 40 minutes.
And why was that, do you think?
Well, in the coroner's hearing, when that became an issue, it was suggested that they were arguing about whether it was a helicopter or an ambulance. That was not been proven, so, you know, we hope that wasn't the case. But regardless, it's irrelevant. The WorkSafe thought it was okay that they waited that time. which we were furious about. Even in the coroner's hearing, we've got them saying, yeah, you know, if they were treating him, but it's just unsatisfactory. And of course it reinforces what happened at Pike.
You were shattered by Pike River, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, it was the biggest industrial accident you and me will ever see, and there's a lot of responsibility to share around for Pike.
The responsibility didn't settle anywhere. It just flew away.
It was just incredible, wasn't it? And there was a case to answer that they found that. It's unbelievable that they didn't go ahead with that. And that's not the only thing, actually. What is the Crown's responsibility to these families? They still haven't faced these families and said, we let you down too, and what's our liability? And we're not giving up on them. We're going to keep on going. And what we've learned from Liverpool and what the families got inspired by from Liverpool was keep going, because if you go away, that's what they're waiting for. You know, just keep going, find new angles, keep pushing, and that's what we intend to do.
It's exhausting keeping going, isn't it? I was looking at Sonia Rockhouse and Anna Osborne the other day and thinking they must be so tired after 5.5 years.
It's more exhausting not keeping going, mate. You see, that's the problem. Letting it go is more exhausting. Letting it go is just unacceptable. They won't let it go, and so we've got to support them, because I don't blame them for that. I wouldn't let it go. It was so outrageous. And you know, what are we doing now? Building stuff with bad steel and carrying on? Nothing's learned either.
What would you change if you could, you know, if you were in the wand-waving business?
It's things like that, mate. It's standards. It's about the health and safety stuff on farms. You know, why not reform it and help them to be safe? Why just assume farming is dangerous and we'll exclude them and we'll put up with it? Why does New Zealand do that? These are the things that, you know, I think we need to push back on.
How are you spending your days?
Oh man, I'm flat out. In fact, I've got to try and not be so flat out, because, you know, I want to go and spend more time with my mother and all those sorts of things. But
we're not going to swing the camera around and look around the room, but your beautiful son, Dylan.
Yeah.
You must be proud of him.
Oh, he's adorable, isn't he?
He is. Have you just met him?
A bit cheeky, but.
And your bro is here.
And my brother, yeah, and then I've got a mum, and I've got a lovely husband, so that's sort of we're compact, but.
Except you're not compact. I mean, you are one of the most loved people. Isn't it funny that, you know, 5 years ago,
I know.
Bloody Helen Kelly, why doesn't she shut up?
I know.
Now people are saying, more Helen Kelly.
Yeah, well,
we
they're
want
saying
more.
that around the world with more left-wing politics is what they're calling it.
No, sorry, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you particularly, specifically. That's not big picture stuff. That's about you, isn't it?
I don't know, but I'm enjoying the work I'm doing, and I'm really determined to try and finish off a few things, you know.
What things?
Well, I'd like to get this forestry thing really robust, including having a community of advocates that can ring the next workplace death families, not just forestry, but give them advice. So we just had a person last night whose husband was killed in a trucking accident, completely in the dark about what they do. So, you know, these families are looking at setting up an organisation, and they'd provide them with the information about WorkSafe and who you can get in touch with, just to provide some support. I'd like to get that up and going so that legacy work of forestry keeps going and there's infrastructure. I'd like to sort out Pike, you know, really hope that decision comes through quickly and we can move forward on that. I don't know what, there's more work to do there, including considering whether we sue the Crown. You know, it's a possibility, we need to get onto that.
Is that a real possibility?
Yep.
It's hard to do, isn't it?
It's expensive. We'd have to get the community support, but we would get it if we have to, unless the Crown may bargain, but, you know, we can't just leave the Crown's questions unanswered. Maybe the Whittle case will give us an opportunity, I don't know. But, you know, we cannot leave Pike as it is. It's just not viable to say, oh, well, move on. We haven't learned enough from it, we haven't changed enough, and we haven't recognise our responsibility enough in it. So I'd like to see some progress on that. And then in farming, we've got to sort out the working conditions of farm workers. You know, they're all being underpaid. When MB go out and inspect, their labour inspectors, 2/3 are not being paid properly, let alone being paid safely or being paid decently, not being paid properly on the minimum code. So those are the sort of the three areas I'm putting a lot of energy in, and then this Mr. Tally.
What would you say to Mr. Tally? And we have to be careful of the laws of defamation. What would you say to him?
I don't know, but I tell you what people say to me most is how, why?
What do you mean, how, why?
How is he like that? Why is he like that? I'm not going to explain his behaviour. I don't try and explain politicians' behaviour either. Each person behaves according to their own accountabilities and values, really.
What are your accountabilities and values?
Well, I feel very accountable to the people that pay union fees. You know, they go out at night and stack supermarket shelves and they contribute a little bit of their income, that shitty little income they get, towards being collective and working with their mates and joining together and improving their lot. I really respect that. And that means that money and that energy that they put in has to be reciprocated by us to make sure we're strong and we can deliver. So that's my sort of philosophy. That keeps me going. And I often say, what would the supermarket worker stacking shelves at night think of this activity? You know, would they, if they understood it and understood the politics of it, would they approve of it, or would they think we were pie in the sky? This is sort of a test that I run past me. So that's what sort of accountability is in my view. And then the values of the union movement are so strong about collectivism and about sticking together and the role of work as a contribution to the economy that we make, and the need to have that recognised, yeah.
Respect?
Yep, it's reciprocity, respect. They're all concepts that have to exist in the workplace. Both parties wanting each other to succeed, not just one way. You know, not seeing your labour as a cost, but as a contribution, as a valuable asset. And also as I say, egalitarian families who are here to earn a living, you know. And I really think there's this narrative in New Zealand that you're lucky to have a job, don't bite the hand that feeds you, be grateful. The job creator is a charity giver, and you're the charity taker, beneficiary versus benefactor rather than a mutual relationship. And a lot of employers will say to you, oh, it's lucky to have a job, they can quit if they don't like it or whatever. You know, this sort of derogatory misunderstanding of the economic situation, yeah. So I think, you know, it was really interesting once when the minimum wage went up. A couple of McDonald's workers went on the tally and said that it wasn't enough, they couldn't survive. And TV3 ran the headline, 2 workers are prepared to bite the hand that feeds them. Because the narrative is that McDonald's are feeding them, not that they're working hard for McDonald's and being paid low wages and that it's a reciprocal arrangement, but that they're somehow being a charity, being fed. I often pick up those little subtleties and tweet them. I'm a big tweeter. Yeah.
What do you want New Zealand to look like? Like Dylan, who's behind us, your boy. What sort of New Zealand do you want his children to live in and their children to live in?
I'd like to see him in a you know, sort of a more accepting society of people as people, and where we encourage them. Instead we just slap them down, embarrass them, teach them never to stick their head up in the fishing village.
You stuck your head up in the fishing village, haven't you?
Yeah, I do think New Zealand is at risk of behaving like a fishing village. If you're a stranger or you've got a different idea, you're a bit controversial. They'll drive you out of town or be threatened by you or suspicious, you know. And that the fleet owners control all the decisions and the fishermen have to do what they're told. That's how I sort of see it, really. It's not good for us.
Helen Kelly speaking at home in Mount Vic in Wellington 2 months ago. That interview, which you can see online if you were listening to it, was filmed by Claire Easton Farrelly and Bex Parsons King. 2 of the men she loved most were there that morning, brother Max and son Dylan. The thing about having a public figure as a mum and as a sister is that you share them with the country. Everyone has an opinion on her union work, on her medicinal cannabis campaign, which became very important to her towards the end of her life, on everything she does. But Max and Dylan were proud of her, so very proud, and proud of what she believed in and fought for. Here they are briefly, starting with Dylan.
She's pretty inspiring. She's a laugh. She doesn't take no for an answer. I don't think I've ever won an argument with her in my entire life, which I know you don't find surprising because you've met her.
Yeah, but as an adolescent, you would have given it a shot, right?
Oh, yeah, many a shot. That's how I know, because I tried a lot of times and it never works.
Was she quite strict when you were, a naughty teenager?
No, but she was a great mum growing up. She always kind of let me know where the limits were and what her expectations were of me, I think, without ever kind of putting her foot down for its own sake, I think, which is very much, I think, what she's like in public life when she's doing battle with the Peter Jacksons and the Peter Tallys of the world. Yeah.
She has incredible character. It's very strong, stoic. As Don says, she doesn't back down. and she's invariably right because she's always coming from a position of the best for people. There's no second guessing, there's just, she knows what is right, and that's what she does.
Her morals are basically unimpeachable, you know. She's got a long and story. I mean, we know this from extensive first-hand experience, obviously, but I mean, now so does everyone else. And so, yeah, for her to kind of lend her kind of moral authority to issues like this, and of course that goes across the whole gamut of all the issues that she's kind of taken on as her kind of pet project. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's good that we care about these things. Maybe not quite as much as she does. She cares a lot, but we clearly are passionate about these issues, and so for a member of our family, for someone that we love, to be kind of throwing her weight around and making progress on this where previously there's been none for ages is fantastic. Yeah, I'm extremely proud.
Back when we were kids and we had towels in the bathroom, and Mum labelled them Max Kelly MP and Helen Kelly PM, and that's what we expected her to be one day. We expected her to be Prime Minister, and you know, that's, yeah, and I think she would have been an amazing Prime Minister.
Did her towel really have Helen Kelly PM on it?
It had Helen Kelly PM. Always put, why am I only an MP?
You are a doting big brother, aren't you?
Very much. She's my baby sister. But she's my big sister. She always will be, and I can't imagine what life will be without her.
You're heartbroken, aren't you? But let's finish on a celebration of her. Why don't you just celebrate your sister? What would you like to say about her?
She'll never be forgotten, and she'll always live on. You know, she's my baby big sister, and you know, she's kept this family on an even keel, and she's always been there. She's helped me out of all sorts of things, and you know, her big fear, she's not afraid of dying. Her fear is leaving us behind, and I think that sums her up. She's one of the least judgmental people I've ever met in my life. She's one of the most gracious people, forgiving. She's my sister.
That's Max Kelly, and the other voice was Dylan Kelly, Helen's son. Let's go to the US now, where Donald Trump is vehemently denying allegations that he groped women, sexually assaulted women, made unwanted sexual advances, you name it. But the controversy about his attitudes to women is growing, and even America's First Lady has joined the phrase. Here is ABC's Zoe Daniel.
It was a furious Donald Trump who addressed a crowd of supporters at West Palm Beach in Florida, following allegations against him published by various media outlets.
These vicious claims about me of inappropriate conduct with women are totally and absolutely false.
The New York Times published an interview with a woman who claims that Donald Trump touched her inappropriately when she sat next to him on a plane during a trip in the early 80s. She claims he put his hand up her skirt. Meanwhile, a People magazine reporter has come out saying that Donald Trump kissed her against her will when she was interviewing him for a story about he and wife Melania's first wedding anniversary 12 years ago.
Take a look. You take a look. Look at her words. You tell me what you think. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Donald Trump's campaign has been in meltdown since an old TV tape emerged in which he said he could force himself on women because he was famous and that he liked to eat Tic Tacs in case he wanted to kiss a woman that he met. Asked during last weekend's second presidential debate whether he'd actually ever done so, he said no.
I was embarrassed by it, but I have tremendous respect for women.
Have you ever done those
women
things?
Have respect for me, and I will tell you, no, I have not.
First Lady Michelle Obama has been out campaigning for Hillary Clinton today.
It's not something we can just sweep under the rug as just another disturbing footnote in a sad election season.
She's taken Donald Trump on.
And to make matters worse, it now seems very clear that this isn't an isolated incident. It's one of countless examples of how he has treated women his whole life. And I have to tell you that I listen to all of this, and I feel it so personally. The shameful comments about our bodies, The disrespect of our ambitions and intellect, the belief that you can do anything you want to a woman.
Mr Trump plans to sue the New York Times over the new allegations, which he says are politically motivated.
That report from the ABC. It's about 25 seconds before 6, after Paul and the news at 6. Miramar Central School apologises to the family of a 6-year-old autistic boy locked in its seclusion room. Baxter Mansfield's family responds to that. And we're in Ngaruawahia, where a gang leader has laid down the law on meth. All of that and more after the news and the pips.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. The Education Ministry investigation has found a Wellington school did use a small room lockable from the outside to confine some children for short periods of time. The investigation followed complaints from a parent about the treatment of an autistic child at Miramar Central School. Eric Frickberg has the details from the Ministry's report, which was released in the past hour.
The report says the room was used as time-out for children in response to hitting, disruption and disobedience, as well as biting, kicking, choking and slapping. It doesn't say how many children were affected, and the number of incidents is unclear because of poor record-keeping. The report says there were at least 46 cases of the time-out room being used, but details remain unclear, and there was a lack of transparency about the way the school was supposed to communicate this issue to parents. The school says the seclusion room was last used on September the 20th and has had the door removed to prevent further use. This is Eric Frickberg.
Primary school teachers are calling for clear guidelines on the use of time-out and other behaviour management techniques for disabled children. The Primary Teachers Union, the NZEI, has been involved in a working group on eliminating the use of seclusion and of physical restraint in schools. It says it looks forward to getting clear guidance for teachers and other school staff. It also wants better training in new methods of behaviour management. And the Chief Ombudsman is to investigate the use of seclusion rooms. Peter Boscher says the extent of the practice will be investigated, along with any related actions or omissions of government agencies. In the meantime, he will ask the Education Ministry to issue an advisory to schools to stop using seclusion. Justice reform advocates believe a child sex offender register is a red herring that creates only an illusion of safety. The first such register was launched today, and the police say it will help them monitor offenders and supervise their rehabilitation. Just Speak's director, Katie Bruce, says the majority of people convicted of child sex offences are never reconvicted for the same offence. Dr Bruce says there's little evidence the registers work because 90% of offenders are never convicted and the majority are perpetrated by a male family member known to the child. She says to create safer communities, the focus needs to be on prevention. Residents in the small Waikato town of Ngaruawahia say it has no more of a methamphetamine problem than anywhere else in the country. A local gang called Tribal Huck has issued an ultimatum to dealers of the drug known as P to stop and leave town by 6:30 this evening, or else the gang would take action. The manager of the Ngaruawahia Community House, Anne Ramsey, says while she knows people who have had to leave housing because of meth contamination, she hasn't seen it as a large problem in the town.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought Ngaruawahia had a bigger epidemic of P than anywhere else, or any less. I imagine it's probably normal if you're looking at P nationwide.
And Ramsey says most residents feel very safe. She says the ultimatum set down by the gang is likely to scare people involved with methamphetamine. The Waikato District Mayor has also said the drug isn't a problem in the town, but a petrol station worker says she's had a couple of drop bags of methamphetamine on the floor, which she's had to flush down the toilet. Sam Chapman says during the weekends at least 3 people come in completely high. Ms Chapman says the gang's ultimatum is great and it's needed. The police say methamphetamine is a serious concern, however people should not take matters into their own hands. Donald Trump is painting the wave of allegations of inappropriate sexual misconduct against him as a massive political conspiracy. A number of women have now come forward saying the Republican presidential candidate groped them or made unwanted sexual advances. A reporter from People magazine has given an account published in the New York Times saying Donald Trump cornered her alone in 2005 at his home in Florida when she was doing a story on his wife Melania and then forced his tongue into her mouth. Mr. Trump has told supporters it's a complete lie.
She said I made inappropriate advances. Take a look. You take a look. look at her words. You tell me what you think. I don't think so.
Donald Trump says all the claims being made about him are fiction and engineered by the Clinton campaign. In Australia, a jury has been told Gable Tosy, who is accused of murdering New Zealand woman Warina Wright, effectively pushed her off his 14th floor balcony on the Gold Coast by making her so scared she tried to flee. Mr Tosy has pleaded not guilty to the murder of the 26-year-old who he met on the Tinder dating app. He chose not to give evidence today in the Supreme Court in Brisbane, and his defence called no witnesses. In his closing address, the Crown Prosecutor, Glenn Cash, told the jury the question of why Ms Wright attempted to climb down from the building was key to their decision, and the answer was fear. He said if they did not rule on the charge of murder, he would seek a decision of manslaughter as an alternative. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. To sport now. The Silver Fern shooter Maria Tutaya is set to return to the court for her first netball test of the year tomorrow night in Auckland. Tutaya missed the quad series in August, the tests against Jamaica last month, and the first two Constellation Cup matches against Australia due to a foot injury. New Zealand and Australia are 1-1 in the 4 Constellation Cup series with Game 3 in Auckland tomorrow night. Tutaya says despite being on the sideline, she's enjoyed watching competition for the shooting spots intensify.
To be able to see shooters like Tupai come on, really nail it in pressured situations, and Amelia Ann coming on and shooting her stuff as well. It's been huge for us, and it's really awesome to see the depth of shooters that are coming through here in New Zealand. So it's healthy competition for me.
Maria Tutaya. Holden's Will Davidson can keep the Peter Brock Trophy after Red Bull Racing failed to have supercar driver Jamie Whincup exonerated in the wake of a controversial Bathurst 1000 finish. An interim ruling by the supercar's National Court of Appeal has rejected Red Bull's request to amend their protest. It means they can't have the charge dropped and can only appeal the severity of Whincup's 15-second time penalty, ensuring no change to the original podium. And the Wallabies and ACT Brumbies rugby player Christian Lili'afano will receive a bone marrow transplant from his sister as he continues to battle with leukemia. He's due to have the transplant next month, having undergone 2 rounds of chemotherapy. That's the news.
I'm Damon Alessa. Join me on Sunday for a discussion about the taste of inequality in New Zealand's largest city. You'll hear from experts Dr. Lisa Marriott, Dame Diane Robertson, Lisa King and Dr. Tuila Percival.
We started supplying a Decile 1 school with lunches, and on the very first day the teacher told me that the kids were saving up the lunches to take home because they didn't know when their next meal was coming from.
Smart Talk at the Auckland Museum at 4 p.m. Sunday on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now heading into the weekend. The short forecast taking us through to midnight tomorrow Saturday for all of the North Island. Periods of rain or showers, isolated thunderstorms and hail are possible tomorrow. However, long, fine spells for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay for the rest of today. Nelson and Buller, showers today, thunderstorms and hail, especially about Nelson. Mainly fine tomorrow, but isolated afternoon showers about Nelson. Westland, showers gradually clearing today, fine tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, occasional rain with thunderstorms and hail north of Canterbury for the rest, or Christchurch for the rest of today. Snow could go down to as low as 400 to 500 metres this evening, and showers should clear up tomorrow. Otago and Southland, a few showers spreading from the south today, mainly fine tomorrow. Showers about the south coast and Stewart Island. Fiordland, mainly fine, showers developing tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, rain developing overnight, some heavy falls tomorrow. Our next news will be at 7.
Thank you so much, Paul. Coming up, we have a response from the family of one of the children at Miramar Central School to the spokesperson on behalf of the Board of Trustees who was on after the news at 5. That's coming up. But let's go to Christchurch now, where a resident says damage to his home has been worsened by the insurer's ineptitude since the earthquakes. Architect Bob Burnett is part of a class action group yet to resolve their claims with insurer Southern Response. The group argues Southern Response systematically underestimated relevant costs and the scope of work required on their homes. As they prepare to head back to court next Wednesday, I asked Bob if his home in the suburb of Huntsbury is a repair or a rebuild.
We thought it's a repair all day, every day in the beginning. And, you know, back in 2011, February 22nd, when we moved out of this house, we thought we'd be back in here in less than 6 months because, you know, I designed it with my wife. She's a Japanese architect. We saw every detail of this going together, and we thought, yeah, it can be done. There was a lot of damage, but we thought it can be done. And as it's worked out, we haven't been allowed to repair it, and it's deteriorated over time. We asked Southern Response, well, originally AMI, and then Southern Response, to put in temporary bracing to make it weather tight. They didn't do any of that. They actually came in and they removed all the jib, which in a New Zealand house provides the bracing for the home, and it's up on the top of a hill in a very high wind zone, so it's been allowed to twist and buckle and get worse, and it's really demoralising and heartbreaking to see something that was an epic home that we poured our heart and soul into just deteriorate. And,
so why weren't you allowed to repair it? I'm really
it.
confused about that. If you were an architect, you felt the house was capable of being repaired, you wanted to repair it, you were prepared to settle with your insurer to simply repair rather than rebuild, why weren't you able to?
We had a contract originally with AMI and then Southern Response to repair the house, 2012. They actually were damaging it more and breaking it more and doing really bonkers stuff. And it got put on hold, and it's probably fortunate in a way. But, you know, we've had the natural disaster, and here we've really had a man-made disaster, which has been a whole lot worse than the original earthquake. We had 2 young kids. We had a 3-month-old baby and a 3-year-old. We had to go and live in substandard rentals because we had 2 dogs, and we saw firsthand how going from a warm, healthy, energy-efficient home, near new home, into an old, damp rental in St Albans affected the health of our kids. So, you know, they were continually coughs and colds, and, you know, one of them that had to be off to the hospital, off to the doctor, off to the hospital, and they didn't know what was wrong. So we eventually had to buy another house, and we've been paying 2 mortgages since then, because at least we could fix it up and make it livable.
Bob, have you had any money from your insurer yet? The earthquake was in February 2011. It is now October 2016.
Yep.
How much money have you been paid out on a home you have been unable to live in for that entire time?
We haven't been paid anything by the insurer. We were paid $115,000 by EQC, and Southern Response took that money. They told us we had to pay that money to them before they started repairing our house.
So you've had no money whatsoever. The money you got from EQC, Southern Response took. You are now paying a mortgage on 2 homes. You are not allowed to live in your first home, and you have had no insurance money for it.
That's correct. Yeah, it's been very, very difficult, and you know, I'm hoping that the group action is going to actually highlight the issues and help see something change. You know, I'm sure people around the country probably are sick of hearing about earthquake stories, but it's still going on, and 6 years later, you know, 5.5, 6 years later, and it's not good enough. And, you know, I really think that for the sake of the rest of the country, people in Wellington or wherever, you know, they're probably feeling a little bit guilty, thinking it should have been us. But if there is a big earthquake tomorrow in Wellington, we don't want them to have to go through the same things that we're going through right now and have been going through for the last 6 years. There's got to be some good come out of this. You know, I think, you know, the old famous quote, Einstein once said that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity.
How much was the damage assessed at? So have you ever had a statement from either AMI or Southern Response, who replaced AMI, telling you how much the damage is worth?
We weren't given any numbers, what the costs were, until quite a lot later, and then it was, yeah, the I can't remember the exact figure, but it was something like 180,000 or something, the original cost to repair this, and you know, every time they came to look at the property, they found new work, and their response would be, don't worry about that, because if there's, we'll just take care of that as a variation if there's anything we've missed. So they go in really low and just try and turn a blind eye and not look at all the damage and put a low figure on it, and then try and control the costs in that way and say we'll just deal with extra stuff via a variation. They're now offering something like 500,000 almost, and they've probably spent quite a lot of money through their inept, botched repairs. But because it's been so long and left to the elements and left to with no bracing and deteriorating, I think it's probably a rebuild, to be honest.
So you were originally told somewhere in the region of $180,000. It's now looking somewhere in the region of $500,000 and probably a rebuild, which would cost how much roughly?
Probably about 1.5 million or something.
So you've gone from 180,000 to $1.5 million on the same house. How is that even possible?
It's because they've actually damaged it more than it was damaged in the earthquakes. They've drilled holes in the floor and they've hit one of the underfloor heating pipes. Their solution to that was to pump silicon in where the water was coming out of the floor. And I don't know what they were thinking, whether they were thinking that we would move back into our near-new home and not want to use our expensive central heating system, but we don't know if that's ever going to work anymore. Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff that they've done which has been just inexplicable. And yeah, so it's crazy stuff.
Bob Burnett saying it's crazy stuff. We went to Southern Response for a response to Bob's situation. Southern Response said they couldn't respond without a privacy waiver from Bob. Bob has decided not to grant Southern Response a privacy waiver. He's completely over them. He says the 40 members of the Southern Response class action head to court next Wednesday. So we're inviting Southern Response to appear on the program to talk about that class action at length then, and we look forward to them being able to do so. The Board of Trustees at a Wellington school has apologised to the parents of an autistic child who was locked in its seclusion room and says it's now been closed. The seclusion room, that is, of course. The Education Ministry has released a report into Miramar Central School's use of the room following a complaint by a parent in July who discovered her 11-year-old autistic son had been put in there on 13 occasions over 9 days. Psychologist Terry Johnston has found there was more than 65 dates in 2015-16 where children were placed in the room for behaviour such as biting, hitting, kicking and being generally disruptive. The report found some occasions where children had been put in the room had not been logged and there was miscommunication between some parents and teachers over its use. Remember, most of these children were from a special education unit. Nairi and Jeremy Mansfield only learnt this week their 6-year-old autistic son Baxter, with a mental age of a toddler, was one of those who wasn't logged. He was put in the room without their knowledge. We'll hear from them shortly, but first here's what the spokesperson for the school's Board of Trustees, Pete McFarlane, said to us earlier.
We told him at the time that we didn't believe Baxter had been in timeout, and that's, to the best of our knowledge, that was the case.
Because it hadn't been logged. Baxter,
that's
a non-verbal small boy with the mental age of a 2 or 3-year-old, had been put in timeout and it hadn't been logged.
Yeah, so I'll just explain a bit further than what happened there, because I'm not contesting any of the facts that Jeremy and Nairi have put, because that tallies with what I found out also. We think he was in there for between a minute and 2 minutes.
Right, but he was put in there, wasn't he? I mean, I don't want to repeat the details of Baxter because it seems gratuitous. Non-verbal, low, mental age of 2 to 3.
Yeah, it's
is that why you've closed the room? Because basically this is not an appropriate response to children like Baxter.
Yeah, I think that over the last 15 years or so since this unit was built and the timeout room was put in it, thinking has changed about how we manage this kind of extreme behaviour.
When you say extreme, Pete, extreme. This Baxter's 6. He's not a member of the headhunters.
Yeah, appreciate what you're saying there. That's true, but I mean, we also have a duty of care to our other students.
So, Nairi Mansfield, Baxter's mum, what did she think about that when we spoke to her? She'd listened to that, and this is what she made of it all.
I'm absolutely sorry too that this has happened, that it took this much media coverage and personal anguish from a lot of people to force some transparency, and for the powers that be to take a closer look was, it's gone a long way. I think we and other parents should have had that transparency a long time ago. I can see that Peter's sentiments are genuine, as were the teachers close to my son, and appreciate the human element in his response. I'm still really disappointed in the principal and what appears to be a dysfunctional board alongside him. John Taylor-Smith has not fronted up when this is his school, and primarily for that reason I stand by my decision to remove my child from that school.
It's Baxter's mum, Ngaruawahia Mansfield. Lots of you suggesting that maybe special education units are simply under-resourced. We will discuss that with the ministry when we get the opportunity to. Let's go to Ngaruawahia now. Does it have a meth problem? Or is a gang ultimatum threatening to drive out those associated with the Class A drug simply patch protection? The tribal Huck gang leader, Jamie Pink, has issued an ultimatum for those associated with the Class A drug methamphetamine to stop and leave by 6:30 tonight. Yes, that's in about 10 minutes' time if you're listening and that's you. But the Waikato District Mayor, Alan Sanson, says he's never come across any meth dealers in the town. Our reporter Tom Furley went to Ngaruawahia to find out what the locals think.
Sam Chapman says she sees at least 3 people high on meth each Saturday and Sunday at the petrol station she works at.
And you notice that, they can't stand up, they can't hold a conversation. It's like, how are you driving? It's pretty scary.
Since moving from Auckland 2 years ago, she says she's seen a lot more of the drug in Ngaruawahia.
I have had a couple of incidences where I've had dropped baggies of meth in the store here. So that's not cool, considering we get a lot of school children come in and buy lollies and stuff after school, and I've picked up bags of meth and flushed them, and it's pretty, I think just because small town you notice it a lot more.
Miss Chapman says there's been a spike in crime over the last year, which she blames on young people going after the drug. It's this problem the local tribal Huck gang has warned must end. There can be no mistaking its presence in the small Waikato town, with patched gang members coming and going from the shops along the main street. Huck's leader, Jamie Pink, while avoiding RNZ News requests for an interview today, could be seen driving down the main road in a car packed with other members pulling the gang salute. At a community meeting yesterday, Mr Pink warned all P dealers to get out of the town by 6:30 this evening, or he'll be paying them a visit. He told RNZ News last night he was too busy rounding these guys up to talk further about the ultimatum. The manager of the Ngaruawahia Community House, Anne Ramsey, says she's never seen the effects of the drug on residents, although she knows people have had to move out of housing because of it.
Jamie is possibly in a better position than us. We possibly move in different circles, so he's probably in a better position to notice it more than we are. But I wouldn't have thought Ngaruawahia had a bigger epidemic of P than anywhere else, or any less. I imagine it's probably normal if you're looking at P nationwide.
Regardless of whether it's visible or not in the community, many locals were in favour of the gang's ultimatum.
Yeah, that's a good thing, if they're kicking them out.
I think it's great. I support them. If they can do it, because there's a gap, there's a need for it, people need to know that we're not going to take this anymore.
I think they're just concerned for the community, and pretty much are the only ones that will speak up about it and do something about it.
The police declined to be interviewed, but in a statement, Senior Sergeant Mike Henwood said while methamphetamine is a serious concern, people should not take matters into their own hands. He said the police did not condone threats of violence or intimidation. Back at the community house, Anne Ramsey says the ultimatum is likely to have an impact.
If I was doing P and I heard Jamie say that, I think I'd move, but I'm not. But I don't know. I think he's bloody minded enough to do it because he's publicly announced that 6:30 is the time. So I can see him carrying on doing something. What that something looks like, if I was the local police, I'd be a bit worried.
From Ngaruawahia for Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
It's 24 minutes past 6 on Checkpoint. Thank you for being with us on this Friday night. Lots of feedback coming in on Miramar Central School and lots of it about resourcing. I have a postgraduate qualification in special education and I've been dismayed to listen to the Miramar Central School story of the timeout room. Although it's not a practice that could ever be condoned, I think the under-resourcing is conducive to poor practice. In our wisdom, we've closed many units where students with severe needs could have respite. Total mainstreaming is too difficult for these students and they often require one-to-one support. The good thing about this story is it has highlighted resourcing. Workers in this area are dedicated and caring and it would be really concerning to undo all the good work this school is doing by media overreaction. The best way forward is to provide strategies and resources to assist overstretched staff. And Lily says, I have an autistic daughter who's 22 years old now. My daughter was put in a timeout room with a teacher aide because she disrupted her class. The other kids were terrified of her, and yet they would try to play together at the playgrounds after morning tea or lunch. Teachers have a responsibility to others and not just one. Lots of you suggesting this could be a resourcing issue, and we will look at that. Thank you, all of you, for your feedback. We thought we'd give the last word tonight to Anna Osborne. She's the widow of Milton Osborne, who died in Pike River, of course. She got to know Helen Kelly in the aftermath of Pike River. Helen Kelly's talked a lot about Pike and her sense of a terrible injustice and inadequacy in the response to it. The pair grew even closer through the shared hardship of cancer and the fight together to legalise medicinal cannabis. Anna Osborne spoke to our producer Bridget Burke about the last time they were together and just how she feels about the prospect of going on without her.
Sonia, Dean and I went up to see her recently because we knew that it would probably be the last time that we ever got to say what we really wanted to say to her and thank her for all she has done for us. We knew that her time was near and that she may possibly slip away into a coma and we not understand what we wanted to say to her. So it was really important that Dean, Sonia and I went up there and we were able to convey to her our heartfelt thanks for everything she has done and for her believing in us. And it was very emotional, a really emotional time, but we look back now and think we were there at the right time because she did understand us and she was saying, look, it's all right, mate, just keep on fighting, don't give up, She says, I've helped you this far, but there will other people that will take up after me and they'll continue to fight for you and with you. So she says, it's okay, mate. As she always did, it's okay, mate. Don't worry about me. We'd be trying to console her and she goes, I'm all right. Just think about you, and what you're going to do and, how you're going to continue this when I go. And, yeah, she was always so bloody positive. And it was only, last week when I spoke with her and she said, well, in a month's time, I'll come back down to your house and we'll have another weekend like we did a few months ago, mate? And I said, oh, that'll be great, Helen. So she was still talking as if she was going to be around for a very long time. So, she never gave up. She fought to the end.
The Court of Appeal decision you're still awaiting. She was a great support even through that.
Absolutely, and that's one really sad thing about it is that next time we go into the court, Helen won't be sitting with us and holding our hand and seeing what the end result is. It was her that believed in us and got us to the Court of Appeal, and she was with us every step of the way and she put so much work, time and energy into it. And to know next time when we go up there that we'll be entering court without this amazing woman by our side is just going to be the hardest thing to actually have to do.
And she was much more than your champion. She was a really dear friend to you. And I know, Anna, that you're not well. How are you now?
At this stage, unfortunately, the chemo treatment hasn't worked like it was expected. So I just had the news that I still have some tumours that didn't go away. So at the moment, I'm just waiting for my team of oncologists to figure out a plan, my next plan of attack. So, but I'm going to be strong and I'll beat this cancer. So if I can, and I will, I'm going to do that for Helen, you know. I'm going to keep fighting like she has. She's my inspiration. What I'd like to say is New Zealand has lost a really amazing woman today with inspiration to so many people. She fought for the underdog and she was just so outspoken. No, I don't think there will ever be anyone that will ever replace Helen. She was an angel in life and now she's an angel in death, and just love her dearly. And my heartfelt sympathy goes to Steve and his son Dylan. And I'd like to thank them for also sharing Helen with us.
Anna Osborne, speaking to Bridget Burke and ending Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you for being with us tonight, and This Week will be back on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend on behalf of our fantastic team. A very good evening indeed.
RNZ headlines at 6:30 now. An Education Ministry investigation has found a Wellington school did use a small room, lockable from the outside, to confine some children for short periods of time. Justice reform advocates believe a child sex offender register is a red herring that creates only an illusion of safety. Residents in Ngaruawahia, where a gang has told pea dealers to get out of town, say it has no more of a methamphetamine problem than anywhere else in the country. And Donald Trump is painting the wave of allegations of inappropriate sexual misconduct against him as a massive political conspiracy. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Has the sacrifice made by New Zealanders in 2 world wars in Europe meant anything?
Europe and Europeans owe a debt of gratitude to the many brave New Zealanders who fought for our freedom.
But what of the future of the EU amid the various